Early in July of 1991, a party of travel-weary passengers assembled on the platform of Johannesburg's main railway station. Many hadn't slept for nearly 24 hours and were glad of a reviving cup of coffee. But this was no ordinary party of travellers, waiting for no ordinary train. From as far afield as Canada in the west to Australia in the east, the cream of the world's leading railway photographers had gathered to join a train that would make South African railway history. The main reason for this gathering was slowly approaching the platform under the catenary of wires from the west. Almost as soon as the massive 15E482 locomotive coupled up to the train, the first of many thousands of photographs that would be taken over the next 3 weeks was safely in the can. The Trans-Limpopo Steam Safari, organised by San Razum and Steam Safaris Limited, was to take the line through the northern Transvaal to the northern border town of Messina and over the Limpopo River at Beitbridge into Zimbabwe. There we'd follow the route to the northwest at Rutenga to Bulawayo, visiting the West Nicholson branch and the line to the border of Botswana as far as Plumtree. From Bulawayo we would head north again to Thompson Junction and on to Victoria Falls. With the easing of political restrictions, the TLSS would be the first ever crossing of the Limpopo River into Zimbabwe by a passenger train, and, by good fortune, a steam locomotive would be at its head. What follows is an account of this epic journey behind steam, organised by steam photographers for steam photographers. Our first taster of the tour was to take the old, twisting and undulating route to Magaliesburg through the suburbs of Johannesburg. Our first photo run past was to take place at an attractive little station at Tarleton, still retaining the semaphore signals which reflected the heavy influence of British railway practice. For the newcomers to the South African steam rail tour scene, it was quite an eye-opener to detrain in the middle of nowhere and stand just where you wanted. Woe betide you if you were in the shot. On arrival at Magaliesburg, our 15E came off the train to be serviced. And after a short break for lunch, our loco was ready for the return run to Krugersdorp, where we would join the main line to Pretoria and the north. The tour organisers, however, had a few things in store. At kilometre post number 29, near Malani, we positioned ourselves high above the line on a rocky hillside, while our train set back about a quarter of a mile. When, and only when, the sun was at its best, the signal was given to go, resulting in a spectacular run past. Our train didn't stop on this occasion to collect us. In the distance, looking back to Magaliesburg, the distinctive sound of a GL Bayer Garrett was approaching, with a high column of black smoke as she toiled up the steep gradient that she was designed for. The locomotive did in fact leave two run past, as the first one wasn't in full sun, and the assembled crowd demanded a retake. From here we get an unusual view of the train from the rear flat end of the guard's van. From this viewpoint you get a fair idea of the very tight curves and steep inclines. By the time our last location was reached, the sun was very low in the sky, but the heavy cloud robbed us of that sunset golden glow. We did, however, provide endless entertainment for some small children and their dog. By the time we reached Krugersdorp, most of the participants were ready to catch up on some long overdue sleep. Unnoticed by many, we sped through the night behind a 25 NC, back through Johannesburg and Pretoria, Petersburg, and onwards over the high veld country. By sunrise the following day, our motive power had been replaced with a Class 15 CA, which had been built in Glasgow at the North British Locomotive Company. At the first run-past location, vegetation still had the ice crystals of an early morning frost, and 2850 struggled to get going on a slightly damp rail at Munich. The next major stop came at the important rail junction of Groenboot, where the engine replenished the water tank and cleaned the fire, and the passengers could stretch their legs. Regular steam working on this line finished as long ago as 1978, and coincidentally was a regular haunt of the 15Fs and CAs. From here, the line we were to traverse swings away to the east from the main line and begins to lose considerable height as we descended the escarpment from the high veld to the low veld. Over the next 25 kilometres, we descended 2,000 feet on a gradient of about 1 in 50. First thing we noticed was the rise in temperature and the lush vegetation, in spite of the fact that it was midwinter. The forests at this lower altitude make a spectacular backdrop for photography. But the curves and steep gradient on this section of the line resulted in this run past being aborted. The train was too heavy for the locomotive to push back up the incline. At Zanin, the train terminated and the locomotive was serviced. The train crew also took the opportunity to replenish all the fresh water tanks, which added considerable weight to the already heavy load. Whilst all this was happening, huge train loads of stone and timber passed through the station and yard. Finally, 2850 eased back onto the train, ready for the grueling climb back to Groenveld. In the days of regular steam, a train of this weight would certainly have been double-headed, and the slow progress of a single locomotive made the train very late. The spectacular climb back up to Groenveld was made in darkness, but provided the sound recordist with one of the most spectacular runs ever, as the locomotive slipped to a standstill on several occasions. With the harsh exhaust of 2850 still ringing in our ears, the much softer note of a 15F seemed to be no contest as we sped through the night over somewhat easier gradients to Louis Trichardt to the northeast. The following morning saw a cold, watery sunrise over the Zoutpansberg Mountains. We skirted these mountains on level track for several miles until we reached the Waterpoort Gorge. It was vital that we descended the gorge at mid-morning when the sun was still in the east in order to get the best photographic conditions. For once we were early, and this meant we could get some superb run-paths in the highly unusual foothill landscape. Filming in the gorge proved impossible due to the extremely limited clearance and the physical impossibility of carrying the bulky equipment up the mountainsides to a safe vantage point. Once through the gorge, the tropical climate became very evident, with a substantial rise in temperature. Exotic flowers and cacti were everywhere at Waterpoort Station, where our locomotive was again serviced. With cheap and plentiful supplies of coal in South Africa, it made good sense to continue running steam. But unfortunately, its high ash content meant frequent cleaning of the fire. This proved to be very time-consuming, and South African railways needed to speed up timetables. As we left Waterpoort, our train began to lose altitude, leaving the mountains behind us as we descended into the northern bushveld, past the now very numerous baobab trees. A sudden burst of life from our locomotive sent a troop of baboons diving for cover. On board the train, passengers were taking advantage of the lounge car and replenishing some of the liquid lost climbing the rocks in the gorge. Steam hadn't passed along this route since 1978 and must have been an alarming sight for any passers-by. Not only was steam a rare sight, but we were the first ever passenger train to traverse this northern route into Zimbabwe. The line was built in 1914 to the border town of Messina, but a passenger service was never established. The line north to the Limpopo River and over Bight Bridge into Zimbabwe wasn't completed until 1929. However, it wasn't until 1976 that the missing link from Rutenga to Bight Bridge was constructed, which linked the first direct route from Zimbabwe to South Africa. As we approached Messina, we could see quite a large welcoming party on the platform. What followed took us all by surprise.
On behalf of the community in Messina, I want to wish you all a happy welcome here in Messina, and thanks very much for stopping here. I understand I didn't get a lot of information beforehand, but I understand that there are about 12 nationalities on the train. I apologize, I can only speak English. I'm not very good at Italian, German, French, Swiss. I even met a guy from Australia here. Ladies and gentlemen, Messina is the most northern part town in South Africa. As you no doubt know, you're going to cross into Zimbabwe, you're then going into Africa. We're a population of about 15,000 people.
Once clear of the customs formalities, the sun was very low in the sky, and the promised run past over the bridge was very close to being abandoned. The locals were highly amused. Not only was this the first steam-hauled train to cross the bridge, but the entire complement of passengers, all with more photographic hardware than they'd ever seen or were likely to see in their lifetime, were leaping off the train and running around like headless chickens, or ostriches in their case, in order to photograph a train. TLSS was now seriously behind schedule. As darkness fell, an NRZ diesel sped us through the night, through Rutenga and Somambula to Hini Junction. When we awoke, we were convinced we'd passed through a time warp. In the early hours, we transferred to the NRZ museum train to be taken off into the darkness by a dirty, leaking, clanking Bayer Garrett locomotive. Steam-hauled freights were passing us with not a diesel in sight. This, at last, was what we'd come to see. Our grime-encrusted garret, burning wanky colliery coal, roared along into the cold morning air, leaking steam from every joint, unlike our smart, clean South African locomotive, as we trundled down the branch line to Umbalabala on the West Nicholson line. All the serviceable locomotives in Zimbabwe are garrets of various classes and wheel arrangements, from 14th Series 262262, 15th and 15th A 464464, and 16 or 16A 282282, to the massive 20 or 20A 482284. Here there were no staged locomotives. This was for real. Our designated loco was failed on Bulawayo Shed, so the yard shunter was commandeered. On our return from Umbalabala, we met a service freight bound for Colleenbourne. Our train disgorged its passengers to get a passing shot, a rare treat for Europeans and Antipodeans. Little did we know that this was to be a regular occurrence over the next few days. By mid-afternoon we were back at Heaney Junction, and a visit to Bulawayo Steam Depot was hastily arranged. Was this a dream? Had we gone through a time warp? No, this was for real. Lines of steaming, smoky garrets loitered in every dark corner of Bulawayo Steam Depot. Sulphurous smoke curled off the chimneys, filling the shed with an acrid, permanent smoke haze. These weren't sleeping giants, but just dozing between turns of duty. Water and pools of oil and grease covered the floor of the shed, and labourers shovelled ash, the dirty byproduct which had collected in the pits. This was the real face of steam traction. The following day was again started very early in order to get the sunrise. We made our way to Bulawayo station, where we joined the museum train again and set off in the direction of Plumtree. At the head of the train we had the veteran 12th class number 190, built by the North British Loco Company in 1926. Plumtree lies on the border of Zimbabwe and Botswana on the main line to Mafeking and South Africa. Our first run past after dawn was made shortly after leaving Bulawayo. The cold, damp air and brilliant sunshine produced some spectacular effects. The temperature rises rapidly and steam evaporates very quickly in the dry atmosphere. On arrival at Plumtree, our locomotive was serviced after shunting the stock into the passenger platform. After some jovial antics with the locals, we were now ready for departure, returning to Fig Tree, where we went to pick up the 7th class locomotive number 43 to double head onwards to Bulawayo.
Oh, yes, thank you.
By now, the brief cold front had passed over Zimbabwe, and temperatures were rising rapidly. Reports were coming in that snow was falling on the Drakensberg Mountains, a prospect none of us could envisage as we travelled through the tropical landscape back to Bulawayo. The evening sun provided some beautiful lighting as we left Fig Tree behind our veteran brace of locomotives. On arrival at Bulawayo, our train and locomotives were serviced, which gave the passengers a chance to relax and eat our evening meal stationary. In the adjacent platform was a sign of the times. The 2000-hour train to Victoria Falls stood with a brand new diesel at its head. The following night was to witness a major setback for the tour. After a night of painfully slow progress in the direction of West Nicholson, we awoke to a lurching train as the two veteran locomotives were in severe difficulty lifting our heavy train up the steep twisting incline between Gwander and Colleen-Bawn. The 12th class had run hot, leaving all the work to the 19th number 330, which was now desperately short of water. The yard shunter at Colleen-Bawn was summoned to assist. Many hours were lost on this section, and what should have been an 0620 departure was now lunchtime.
After last night, particularly strenuous. I don't think that you're quite in the Chris Bonington Annapurna League this morning, are you?
What are you?
No.
He certainly is.
And I know for a fact he isn't.
That's true. Is he ever?
The following run-pasts at Kudu Vale should have taken place at dawn and were severely curtailed. After our train had passed, we waited for a mixed goods and passenger to follow behind the 19th number 330, which was due to take us on to Gwander. From Gwander, we were to waste no time in order to return to Bulawayo on schedule. Our departure from Bala Bala was scheduled for lunchtime. Now it was a spectacular sunset. The following morning found us at Thompson Junction, and surprisingly back on schedule. The air was thick with an acrid smell of coal dust and smoke, not surprising as we were in the middle of the vast Wanky colliery system. Our priority kilometres away to the north, and it's not often that you can take a steam train ride to see one of the 7 wonders of the world. However, there were a few tasty morsels to be had before getting to the end of the line: Zambezi, Sanguja, Jafuta, and Victoria Falls. On board the train, an atmosphere of eager anticipation was reaching an all-time high as we rolled into Victoria Falls station. It was hard to imagine that just over 10 years ago, to get here without being shot at or bombed was an achievement. Now all you have to worry about is not being mugged by a troop of baboons. What time was that train supposed to arrive? On Sunday the 21st of July, the logistical climax to the tour was to take place. A steam-hauled train of passengers over the Victoria Falls Bridge into Zambia. However, no one had informed the station master at Victoria Falls, which caused just a little confusion.
The diesel is hooking off the back of here. Put them onto here. So we can almost follow your plan for the work now. That's all right. As I say, as long as we're back here by Excellent. Really, because it looks like it's good.
As we rolled out onto the bridge over the spectacular Zambezi Gorge, all thoughts of sore feet, confusion, late trains, and horrible tea melted away as we absorbed the beauty of Victoria Falls. This was Africa. In the Livingston Railway Museum, we received the VIP treatment as we were given a free run of the museum site. Zambian Central Office of Information officials held a press conference on the train as we returned to Victoria Falls, and some large hints were dropped for them to get some of their steam locomotives in working order.
National Heritage Conservation Commission, whom I almost forgot. Mr. Nicholas Katanekwa, and you've got Mr. Wiseman Tayali. He actually has been a link man on this safari, on the Zambian side. So we can fire questions to these.
Obviously, steam train is also a very big attraction, and we would like to spend more time in Zambia if you could get some of your engines working again. In the European countries, quite a number of country railway museums have gone to the time and trouble and expense of putting one or two of their locos back into working order for fan trips or enthusiast trips. Of course, we are from the United Kingdom, and this country, above all the others, has done more for railway preservation. We probably have a history of constructing locomotives, and this in its own way has caused a big following of people wanting to visit the country.
So I'm just doing a filling shot at the moment.
Our brief taste of paradise was quickly at an end as we again found ourselves the following morning in the smog of Old Hoangi, with a volcanic display from our 16A as we took the old line to Thompson Junction. It was a welcome sight once again to see straight locomotives in the form of 19th class on the Wanky Colliery Company system. It's often referred to as Barnsley in the bush, being one of the largest coal producers in southern Africa. Back on NRZ, our train took an afternoon trip to Lukosi behind a 16A class. This was to provide us with some of the finest displays of clag we'd ever seen. The following day, Tuesday the 23rd, we were to see very little in the way of run-pasts as we sped along southwards back to the Limpopo River, and a 15F waiting at Bight Bridge. However, some persuasive selling of raffle tickets was providing some entertainment en route.
Back home again. Is there anybody here from Manchester who would like to buy a ticket? There's a strong possibility you could win this. As a third prize, something which I'm sure you've all been wanting to take home and put in your train or smoking rooms, a genuine African calabash with a steam locomotive painted on it. What finer souvenir from the African continent than this genuine? In fact, you could even take it as a first prize, because there is a choice between any of these things for a first prize. What is the price of the tickets? Only £5. Goodness me, but that's ridiculous. I know it is, because you cannot purchase these things anywhere in the world today except on this train. And where is the money going to? To the National Railways of Zimbabwe Museum, and it is all for a good cause, okay? In Zimbabwean currency, 25 rand, $25 or 25 rand South African money, or a good old £5. Step right up, don't be shy. Come on, there are loads of tickets left, and grab your opportunity to take this genuine cabside plate home. If you like it, it's got 2 holes here. You could wear it as an earring.
Wait a minute, I paid $50 here.
Hello there, sir. Thank you very much for your help. Are you getting off here? Sorry? Oh, right. We'll see you again next year, all being well. Okay, coming back. I think that's fine. Good. Thank you for your help.
As we said farewells to our Zimbabwe host, Mike Jason, 15F 3094 backed down to couple up once again at Bight Bridge. As we recross the border back into South Africa, the Limpopo River and a line of barbed wire fence served as a reminder of what was once a hostile and dangerous land. Waterport was again time for the crews to service the locomotive, ready for the long climb back up the gorge. The sun was already getting low in the skies, and the photographers were concerned that we'd miss out on some master shots. Nearly 3 hours late, many of the stops had been missed in order to gain time, but it was decided that one final shot could be fitted in with the background of the Sortpansberg Mountains, as 3094 made a spirited climb out of the gorge. Our late arrival at Louis Trichardt meant that by the time 3094 had been serviced, photography would be out of the question, which was all the more frustrating as 15 CA 2850 would be double-headed with 3094. The shadows grew longer as our locomotives replenished their very large tanks. Overnight, much ground had to be made up if the tight schedule was to be met. Our 15F and CA took us through Groenbelt and once again traversed the escarpment down from High Veld to the Low Veld behind Diesel to Hertzbrut, and Electric to Kaapmunden, the capital of the Low Veld. We arrived shortly before dawn in a much greener and more lush landscape of mountains and fertile valleys. Our motive power was to be the lightweight Class 24, number 3675, and a trusty 19D, number 3323. But our destination was to be Barberton, up a steeply graded 55-kilometre branch line which hadn't seen steam since 1973. 19Ds were the predominant motive power for the line in latter years before dieselisation. Barberton owes its existence to forestry, agriculture and gold mining, and asbestos is also mined in the mountains on the border with Swaziland. The more humid atmosphere at this lower level meant that the steam would hang in the atmosphere, but on the minus side, the line-side vegetation is much denser. At Sheba, the line crosses the River Karp on 2 high steel girder bridges, offering some superb photo opportunities. That evening, on our return to Kaapmunden, the train made a spirited run up the valley of the Crocodile River, climbing over 1,000 feet to Nieuwsbriet under the wires. Water had been arranged for our locomotives at Rosehor, only to find the tanks empty after the water had been sold to a local farmer. Our steam locomotives were detached, and we awoke to find a diesel at the head of the train, as the steam had been sent on a head light engine to Saby in order to conserve water. Saby is situated deep in the forested Drakensberg Mountains, giving some spectacular views from the train. At Saby, the weather was, as always, perfect, and the cold, damp atmosphere gave some lovely effects as the steam intermingled with the palm trees. Our next destination was up the heavily graded line to Graskop on the edge of the Kruger National Park. For this trip, the train had to be lightened to 7 coaches for the single 19D. Unlike the other lines visited on this tour, steam is still used regularly on this special excursion run by Rovos Rail from Pretoria to Graskop and return. Naturally, several run-pasts were organised for this section. Sit back and savour this spectacular line as our 19D gets to grips with the fierce gradient. At Grasskop, we crossed the Transnet Museum train, which was forming the Brush with Steam tour. Unfortunately, it had emptied the water tanks. We can see our 19D turning on the triangle, sporting the familiar diamond-shaped North British Locomotive Works plate. At long last, we departed for Saby, where we changed engines for the unique GF 462264 Bayer Garrett locomotive, which used to work this area up to the end of steam in 1973. With the sun now very low in the sky, some spectacular effects could be achieved. At a location called Pine Boss, a reverse curve followed by a 180-degree curve made a spectacular location. However, it was impossible to achieve a continuous sequence. From here, our train continued to Henriksdal. With the sun almost set, a final run pass was achieved in the forest above Pine Boss, and it was decided to reverse the train back to Pine Boss. From here we joined the crew on the footplate for the return run to Saby. Late that evening, much shunting was done to reassemble our train. Unfortunately, our departure up the valley back to the main line at Neilsprit was in total darkness behind the two 19Ds. It was one of the most spectacular performances of the tour. Overnight to Belfast was by electric traction. It was a cold, frosty dawn as the GMAM Garrett backed onto our train. The line to Leidenburg is one of the most steeply graded lines in South Africa. From its lowest point, at Spekboom at 2,427 feet, we climb to Nederhorst at 6,875 feet, over a distance of 35 kilometers, with sections as steep as 1 in 30. The line was constructed as far as Leidenburg in 1910, and then on to Steelport to the chromium ore mines. Again, the landscape is different, resembling the border regions of Scotland, with grassy rolling hills and small copse of trees and farmhouses. Today the line is still very busy, with diesel locomotives in multiples of 6 to haul 3,500-ton trains of ore. In typical countryside, our GMAM number 4122 makes a spirited run past near Palmer as the wintry sun warms up the frost-laden grasslands. And again at Palmer Station, the peace is shattered by the thundering exhaust of 4122. When these locomotives were in regular use on this line, the blast pipe petticoats had to be replaced every 2 months because the ferocity of the char from the firebox eroded them away as the locomotives blasted up the 1 in 30 gradients. Our hopes of a snow-clad landscape at Santa were dashed as the temperatures were well up around 18 degrees centigrade with bright sunlight. It was difficult to believe that such extreme weather conditions as snow could ever exist in this land. At Leidenburg, it was time to reflect on the tour. Chris Gamble summed up why he came on these tours.
It's just perfect, absolutely perfect. And this is the one thing this country has got to offer us, the scenery and the climate. And of course then there's the added attraction of the train as well. And getting covered in soot every day, soot and cinders. There's big steam engines belting away, making nice, magnificent sounds, whistling and hooting and getting stuck on banks and skidding. Very, very nostalgic. If anybody remembers what BR was like in the 1950s, very similar here.
In a landscape of rolling hills and grass, our locomotive and train looked perfect as we stormed our way up the grade back to the summit near Santa. And again, with a dramatic backdrop of rocky hillsides and low afternoon sun, 4122 makes a superb sight for the final run past of the day. The final leg of the TLSS took us west along the bleak high veld country to the industrial heartland of the Transvaal. Overnight, we ran along freight-only lines in order to gain the main line back to Johannesburg. At Bethel, a gleaming 25NC number 3472 was to be our final steam-motive power. A very cold, windy sunrise didn't do justice to the superb condition of 3472, and poor rail adhesion was a problem for the 25NC on several sections of this line. At Devon, our train crew were rewarded for their hard work over the last 14 days, and so the final run past took place in glorious sunshine behind a superb locomotive. From Johannesburg, many of the passengers joined the Brush with Steam, organised by Transnet, to spend a week at the Kimberley Steam Festival on the longest tour train ever run on SAR. But for the TLSS, Garrett's had been a major ingredient. At Vermont, we take a last look at a classic locomotive.